What if the biggest selling album of 1976 became the instrument of its creator's destruction? A talk box that turned guitar strings into a human voice. 8 million records sold in a single year. Then a Rolling Stone cover that stripped away everything he had built. A film so catastrophically mocked that audiences shouted at the screen, from Golden Boy to Punchline in under 2 years. This is the rise and fall of Peter Frampton. There is a stone staircase at Bromley Technical School in England that very few people in the world would recognize. But if you could go back to the early 1960s and stand on those steps during the lunch hour, you would hear something remarkable. 2 teenagers sat there every day, using the natural echo of the stone walls to jam on Buddy Holly songs. One of them was named David Jones. The other was Peter Frampton. Neither boy had any idea what was waiting for them on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean. Frampton was born in 1950 in Beckenham, Kent, and grew up in the Bromley area, the son of Owen Frampton, an art teacher with a deep passion for jazz. It was from his father's record collection, particularly the Django Reinhardt albums stacked on the shelf, that young Peter first heard the guitar as something more than noise. It was a voice. By the age of 8, his parents enrolled him in classical music lessons, including classical guitar. His first instrument was a banjolele that had belonged to his grandmother, a lifelong theater fan. Small and a little ridiculous, but it planted a seed. Before we continue, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. By his early teens, Frampton was playing in school bands. By 16, he had turned professional. In 1966, he joined a London pop group called The Herd. The music was raw, the energy was immediate, and something else happened that Frampton hadn't asked for and didn't want. The British teen press took one look at Peter Frampton and decided he was a product. A magazine called Rave named him the face of '68. Overnight, he became a teen idol, the kind whose photograph got cut out and taped to bedroom walls. And while that brought attention, it came at a cost he would spend the rest of his career paying. Critics stopped listening to his guitar. Seeking escape from that image, Frampton made a bold move in 1969. He joined forces with Steve Marriott, the firecracker singer formerly of the Small Faces, to form Humble Pie. This was a deliberate declaration. No more pop magazines, no more teen idol nonsense. Humble Pie was built on heavy riffs, raw blues, and a work ethic forged in the clubs of England. During those years with Humble Pie, Frampton's reputation quietly grew into something durable. He became a sought-after session guitarist, contributing to George Harrison's landmark All Things Must Pass in 1970, and working alongside Harry Nilsson and Jerry Lee Lewis. He was building the kind of credibility that couldn't be manufactured or taken away. It was during the Harrison sessions at Abbey Road that something happened which would change everything. A Nashville steel guitarist named Pete Drake demonstrated a device called a talk box, a tube that channeled guitar sound directly into the player's mouth, allowing him to shape and vocalize the notes. Frampton heard it and felt something shift inside him. He later recalled that the sound had dropped his jaw. He had found the tool he didn't know he had been searching for, but Humble Pie kept pulling in a different direction, heavier, more aggressive, more suited to the arena rock machine being built around them by their manager. In 1971, Frampton made his most consequential early decision. He walked away, just as Humble Pie reached the peak of their commercial success, and stepped back into the unknown with nothing but a solo career in front of him. The years between 1972 and 1975 were not glamorous ones. Frampton released 4 solo albums, and while each contained genuinely impressive guitar work, none of them lit the charts on fire. He had high-profile guests. He had critical respect in the industry, but serious musicians still slept on tour buses and played to half-empty theaters on a Tuesday night in Ohio. What he did have was the road. Frampton played relentlessly through those years, building an audience one sweaty club at a time. And somewhere in all that grinding, he quietly perfected something extraordinary. On stage, with the lights low and a crowd in front of him, something unlocked. The economical guitar work that sometimes felt restrained on record became visceral and alive in person. The talkbox had evolved into something almost supernatural. He also had a guitar unlike any other. In 1970, while playing with Humble Pie at the Fillmore West in San Francisco, A fan lent him a modified 1954 Gibson Les Paul with 3 humbucking pickups. Frampton played it that night and could barely put it down. That black Les Paul became inseparable from his sound for the next decade. And after surviving a plane crash years later, he would christen it the Phoenix. By 1975, his manager recognized that the gap between the studio recordings and the live performances was enormous. The album sounded fine. The live shows were electric. The solution seemed obvious. Record the live show and let the world hear what the audiences in those theaters and ballrooms already knew. The recording sessions for Frampton Comes Alive took place between June and November of 1975, across several American venues. The most significant recordings came from the Winterland Ballroom in San Francisco, where Frampton had cultivated a genuinely devoted following over years of touring. Or engineer Chris Kimsey used mobile recording units to capture the shows with remarkable fidelity, preserving the energy without scrubbing it clean in post-production. There were minor fixes here and there, but the album remained an honest document of what it felt like to be in that crowd. The centerpiece of the double album was the 14-minute version of Do You Feel Like We Do? By this point, Frampton had spent weeks mastering a high-powered talkbox built by Bob Heil, a device that offered far greater volume and clarity than the prototype he had first encountered at Abbey Road. When that guitar began to speak to the audience, when the notes shaped themselves into something resembling a human voice asking a question, the crowd responded as one. It wasn't a trick or a gimmick. It was a genuine conversation between a musician and thousands of people who suddenly felt like the only ones in the room. Frampton Comes Alive was released in January 1976. Word spread fast. 3 singles dominated FM radio throughout the spring and summer. The album climbed to number 1 on the Billboard 200, where it stayed for 10 of its 97 weeks on the chart. By year's end, it was widely regarded as the biggest album of 1976. Overnight, Peter Frampton wasn't rising anymore. He had arrived. The summer of 1976 belonged to Peter Frampton in a way that defied easy explanation. Frampton Comes Alive was everywhere. For a country still healing from Vietnam and Watergate, still looking for reasons to exhale, the music offered something simple and urgent. It felt like joy. The timing was no accident. 1976 was the American bicentennial, a year when the nation made a conscious decision to celebrate itself, to lean into the idea of renewal and possibility. Frampton's music, melodic and unguarded and physically exhilarating, fit perfectly into that cultural mood. He wasn't asking hard questions or issuing manifestos. He was standing on stage with a guitar that could sing, asking the crowd if they felt what he felt. And they did. Every single night. Baby, I love you. The stadium tours were overwhelming, sold-out arenas, millions of copies sold in the United States alone. Rolling Stone put him on the cover. Magazine racks from coast to coast featured that face. Long hair, open shirt, guitar slung across his chest like a statement. For a brief, extraordinary window, Peter Frampton was the face of American rock and roll. But something shifted quietly beneath all that success. The Rolling Stone cover presented Frampton shirtless, posed like a model, his expression soft and inviting. It reached an entirely new demographic. Teenage girls who had never heard of Humble Pie, or spent years following a guitarist through small venues. The serious rock audience that had built him up through years of patient devotion began to feel something cooling. Frampton recognized the danger, even as it was happening. He later said the image had totally overridden everything else, and that people forgot he could play guitar. The machine that had elevated him was now quietly rewriting who he was. Success had taken something from him, at the very moment it appeared to be giving him everything. The machine had sped up. There was no slowing it down. The pressure to follow Frampton Comes Alive was unlike almost anything the music industry had seen before. You didn't follow a record that sold millions of copies in a single year. You tried to survive the impossible expectations attached to it. The label wanted another album, the public wanted another phenomenon, and Frampton, exhausted from months of non-stop touring and overexposed beyond anything he had planned for, was running on fumes. I'm in You arrived in 1977. The title track was a genuine hit, climbing the charts and demonstrating that Frampton could still write a compelling melody. But the album told a different story, where Frampton Comes Alive had felt raw, honest, and immediate. I'm In You felt calculated. The sound was softer, more polished, more pop-oriented. As though someone in a boardroom had decided the way to hold on to the teenage audience was to sand off every rough edge that had once made the music feel dangerous. Rock radio cooled on him quickly compared to the frenzy around Frampton Comes Alive. The listeners who had discovered him through years of live performances, who had stood in clubs and watched him coax impossible sounds from a Les Paul, felt something had been lost. The album cover, with its studied prettiness, confirmed their fears. And then came the film. Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band was produced by Robert Stigwood in 1978. A garish, loosely plotted jukebox musical built around the Beatles' catalog without the Beatles' participation. The concept was staggeringly misjudged. Take the most beloved album in rock history, strip away the artists who gave it meaning, surround it with an incoherent narrative, and cast Peter Frampton and the Bee Gees as the leads. Frampton later said he had agreed to the project believing Paul McCartney would be involved, and felt misled when he realized that wasn't the case. By the time he understood what the film actually was, there was no clean exit. He showed up. He committed to it, and it didn't matter. The critics were merciless. The audiences were worse. In one particularly devastating scene, Frampton's character stood on a ledge in a moment of cinematic crisis. And in some theaters, audiences reportedly laughed and shouted at the screen. The film became a cultural shorthand for disaster, and Frampton's name was permanently attached to it like a label he couldn't peel off. In June of 1978, as if the universe required one final blow, Frampton was involved in a near-fatal car accident in the Bahamas. He suffered significant injuries, and yet, in the strange arithmetic of that terrible year, he later noted a grim silver lining. The accident kept him from attending the film's New York premiere. He didn't have to sit in a theater and watch it happen in public. From rock's golden boy to cultural punchline in under 2 years. The crowd that had once sung every word had gone quiet. FM radio moved on. Punk rock tore through the industry like a brush fire, burning away everything smooth and stadium-sized. The sounds of 1976 belonged to another era, and Peter Frampton, who had embodied that era more completely than almost anyone, suddenly had nowhere to stand. The 80s arrived without ceremony for Peter Frampton. The tours shrank. The venues got smaller. Albums came and went without much noise. The industry that had celebrated him as the face of mainstream rock success in 1976 had quietly reclassified him, moved on to the next phenomenon, and left him to figure out who he was without the machinery of superstardom behind him. What he discovered, slowly and sometimes painfully, was that he was a guitar player, not a teen idol, not a pop icon, not a product to be repositioned for whatever demographic the label had targeted that quarter. A guitar player who had been playing since he was 11 years old, who had jammed on stone steps with a boy named David Jones, and played sessions at Abbey Road and survived years of grinding tour dates. That person was still there. He just needed space to find his way back. The turning point came in 1987, and it arrived from an unexpected direction. David Bowie, his old schoolmate from those Bromley technical lunch hour sessions, invited Frampton to join the Glass Spider tour as his lead guitarist. The tour put him back in front of massive audiences and, more importantly, put the spotlight back on his playing. Frampton later called it a huge gift, and he meant every word. The credibility that had been buried under magazine covers and a disastrous film began, slowly and steadily, to resurface. The rebuilding continued through the 90s and into the new millennium, quietly and without fanfare. Frampton released albums. He toured. He gave guitar clinics and collaborated with musicians who respected the craft he had always represented. He reconnected with the instrument that had been the truest version of himself since he was a child. The audiences were smaller now, but they were devoted. They were there for the music, not the image. Then, in 2007, something unexpected happened. Frampton released a solo instrumental album called Fingerprints. No vocals, no talkbox theatrics, just guitar, clean, melodic, deeply felt. The Recording Academy heard it and awarded it the Grammy for Best Pop Instrumental Album. It was a formal declaration from the music establishment that Peter Frampton had always been, and remained, a world-class musician. The image had never been the truth. The guitar always had been. There is a particular kind of courage in continuing to show up when you know the ending is coming. Peter Frampton understood that courage better than most. In the mid-2000s, after a series of unexplained falls on stage, he received a diagnosis that reframed everything. Inclusion body myositis, a rare degenerative muscle disease that progressively diminishes the body's ability to move. For a man whose entire identity was built on the precise movement of his fingers across guitar strings, the diagnosis was devastating. His doctors told him they believed decades of constant guitar playing may have actually slowed the progression of the disease in his hands. The very thing that had defined his life had, in some measure, been protecting it. In 2019, Frampton launched his finale tour, a farewell run of concerts designed to let him perform while he was still at the peak of his abilities before the disease made it impossible. Night after night, he stood on stage and played with the same precision and warmth that had first made audiences lean forward in clubs 50 years earlier. The audiences who had spent decades living with that music gave everything back to him. And then, in 2024, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame came calling. Roger Daltrey of The Who inducted him, and Frampton stood at the podium and described the collapse of the late 70s, the film, the backlash, the years of rebuilding in relative obscurity, as a gift. A gift because it had stripped away everything false and left only what was real: his family, his friends, and his enduring love for the guitar. The collapse wasn't the end. It was the moment the noise finally cleared. And what remained, quiet and stubborn and unmistakable, was the music. Just the music, the way it had always been. Peter Frampton sold more records in a single year than almost any rock artist before him. Then, the machine consumed him. But he never stopped playing. He survived the backlash, the film, the diagnosis, and came out the other side still holding that same guitar. Maybe it was never really a collapse. Maybe it was the price of burning, that bright, that fast. What's your Frampton memory? Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more of rock's greatest stories.